Hey guys, my name's Nick. I'm a Microsoft Certified Expert Administrator. Create a lot of content for MSPs, and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to map Microsoft 365 Business Solutions to the NIST Cybersecurity framework. Notice I did mention this is specific to the M365 Business Solution. I will be doing later videos to show you how it maps to the enterprise space as well too, and the enterprise solutions. But my target market for most of my content itself is the SMB space. So that's what we're going to be aligning with here today. When I think about the objectives and goals that I want to have for this video series, it's first and foremost, again, to show you how to map the Microsoft 365 business solutions to the NIST cybersecurity framework. Each video will be related to one of the core functions of the framework, and we'll be going through and showing you how the categories and subcategories of that function map to the M365 business solutions. Additionally, I'll be showing you some action items that you can take to better align yourself and the customer with the particular framework category itself. Secondly, here we'll be going through a lot of cybersecurity policies, risk management policies, vulnerability assessments, and overall business practices to closely align with the NIST framework. This video is meant for both the MSP that's just starting out and also an MSP who's been in business for many years. I think it's best practice to periodically review the policies and procedures that you have in place, especially with the changing security landscape itself. So today we're going through, as far as the agenda goes, intro to NIST Cybersecurity Framework, high-level overview for those of you who are aware or maybe have first being introduced to this today, how that relates to the FedRAMP certification. We'll be going through the NIST Core functions and the categories we'll be covering across this video series. And each video after this video is going to be showing you how to map the solutions of Microsoft to a particular core function. And today we'll be focusing on the identify core function itself from NIST. Before I get into the NIST cybersecurity framework, I did want to briefly discuss the shifting security landscape to heighten the importance of what we'll be covering and the M365 business solution as a whole. So this diagram that you see here is straight from Microsoft. I'm not going to go through each one of these categories here or these line items, but the digital landscape has definitely changed the way that people and businesses do work. So we've moved from a trusted perimeter network where we had access to all of our resources and applications in one spot to a mindset from an employee standpoint saying, hey, I want to work from anywhere at any time on any device. Businesses are onboarding many third-party SaaS applications in efforts to enhance productivity, but that brings a lot of shadow IT to the company. Ultimately, there's a big problem for the IT administrator because you're trying to restrict access, I should say, to corporate resources in a secure manner, but the employees are complaining that you're decreasing their productivity. And that's a lot of the solution that we'll be covering with the M365 business stack as well too while we go through this video series. So many of you may know the NIST cybersecurity framework already. Some of you may be just getting introduced, but you can really think of it as a blueprint for an organization to manage and reduce your cybersecurity risk. Lots of the recommendations in categories and subcategories of each core function that I'll be going through here today brings awareness to where you might have some exposure from a risk standpoint across the assets in your organization or the procedures you have in your organizations. So NIST security standards are the foundation for FedRAMP, and FedRAMP is a government-wide program that provides a standardized approach to security assessment, authorization, and continuous monitoring for cloud-based services. On a high level, just think of yourself closely aligning with NIST is closely getting you aligned with a FedRAMP certification. And as we slowly shift to the cloud from the sense of our Active Directory and web applications and things of that nature, it gets more and more important to align with FedRAMP standards. So these are the 5 core functions of the NIST cybersecurity framework. These are what we'll be going through in the video series. Today we're going to focus on the identify core function and each of the categories listed below. So I'll be showing you each of the Microsoft solutions if they do apply to one of these categories, and then I'll show you what subcategories are met with the particular solution as well too. So we're going to start off here with asset management, and this is just a description straight from NIST as well here too. So the data, personnel, devices, systems, and facilities that enable the organization to achieve business purpose are identified and managed consistent with their relative importance to the business objectives and organization's risk strategy. So on a high level here, I like to ask a lot of questions, and this is consistent across each solution or each category, I should say, that we'll get into, that either you're going to ask yourself or the customer to bring awareness about the solution and really make the customer realize, in the sense of customer questions, where they are exposed from a security and compliance standpoint. So in this particular solution, we want to gather the assets that the company uses to access corporate resources and understand where users are accessing those resources, how they're accessing those resources, are they off the network, what kind of data is involved in those assets. Most cases in today's landscape, people are accessing corporate data on their personal cell phone in an unsecure manner. And if that device is lost or stolen, that data is available to whoever may pick up that device as well too. So that one's a high importance that really is eye-opening when you bring that up to a particular business in general. Additionally, from the standpoint of an employee leaving the company as well too, being able to remotely wipe that data is something that's highly important. And this is applicable to not only business customers, but also obviously the compliance regulation firms that need to comply to certain requirements. So the solution from M365 here is going to be Azure AD and Intune. So we want to manage and protect our key assets in a zero trust model. This is quote unquote a zero trust model where we are using user and device trust claims to grant access or block access to resources. So if you think about that, it's saying, hey, the user is signing in from a risky location, I want to block access. Or this device is in an unhealthy state, I want to block access. Or want to grant access based off of them being healthy and providing security like MFA. And this is more along the lines of conditional access, which we'll get into. But when we think of zero trust, this is how we have to enable access to our resources, this basic conditions control type mentality here. So when you look at the user and device trust claims, they span across the user identities, the PCs, the Macs, the mobile devices, the cloud applications, the locations on or off your trusted network is really the big key there. So with Azure AD moving from left to right here, you can extend your security perimeter into the cloud by setting up Azure AD Connect, and this pushes the user identities into Azure Active Directory, synchronizes their passwords, and allows you to give access in a secure manner to cloud-based applications. You can additionally add your own on-prem applications or external applications into Azure AD to grant single sign-on access. This is good in two ways, one of which is from the security perspective, because users don't have to keep up with as many passwords, they're not storing them in an unsecure manner, they're not sharing them in an unsecure manner. That one just helps you reduce the security exposure. And then secondly, you look at the standpoint of productivity and change management. If you have a user that's onboarded or moving into a new department within the company, you can easily access or grant access to these applications based off of group membership. So you would say something like, oh, the finance department gets access to Google, Dropbox, and DocuSign. And when they leave that particular department, their access is immediately removed too. So it helps from an efficiency standpoint and a security standpoint. When we look at Intune, this is both mobile device management and mobile application management. So this allows us to separate both corporate and personal data on an application level, and that's even without enrolling the device completely for our control in the device management of Intune. So with mobile application management, we can encrypt corporate data on these applications. We can redirect users to manage applications like Word or Outlook instead of the native mobile client, or native mail client, I should say, on the particular device in an easy fashion, right? So they say, hey, you can't use this on this device, please use it in the Outlook app. And the customer or the end user understands this is where I need to go to access my mail. Secondly, we can remote wipe the data that's on there, just corporate data, and protect the personal data. So if it's a sense of, hey, I have some personal Word docs on here and I don't want them removed, you can easily access that and remove only corporate data when they leave. And you can restrict cut, copy, paste abilities, restrict save as abilities to unmanaged applications. So the MAM solution is really powerful because this is solving a big security issue that we have today, especially with personal devices. From the mobile device management section, this allows you to push down device controls, restrictions, compliance policies, things of that nature to the device that says, hey, I need this device to have BitLock encryption to be compliant, or something like that. So you realize when it's in an unhealthy state, such as malware being detected on the device, maybe you want to prevent access to corporate data in a certain sense. And these controls are all available with the M365 solution. So the business case here, again, Intune mobile application management. User accesses their email on their personal cell phone. They try to save corporate documents to their personal Google Drive. They're blocked from doing so with a message that states that their corporate policy does not allow saving to unmanaged applications. So again, just very light touch as far as the restrictions available, but it does protect your data on the mobile devices like Android and iOS. I have a whole video series about this on my channel right now too that shows you exactly what the end user experience is with this as well. Azure AD is the other example here. So change management has always been a cumbersome process for company XYZ, and the users often grow frustrated when they move across departments because they do not have access to applications they need. Using Azure AD, you can add applications to the portal for single sign-on and grant access based on group membership. So this is something where we can gather a complete inventory of all the applications, and these are the ones that are quote-unquote managed applications, and the ones that they can move data back and forth from if they need to or have that particular access. So this is really tightening down this broad landscape of tons of third-party SaaS applications being onboarded. So some of the action items that I recommend that you take here is, first and foremost, gather an inventory of all the applications across the organization and assign them a risk score. And again, that's based on the standpoint of what kind of business data is in there, what kind of users access that data, what kind of rights those users have from the standpoint of role-based access control within the 365 portal, things of that nature, so you understand completely the landscape of which they're working out of. And then you can develop a clear policy for them to onboard and offboard applications as well. So you also want to understand what device types you will support from the MDM standpoint. With Intune, you can support Windows, iOS, Mac, and Android devices. So maybe you don't want to support Macs, and you just say, hey, I want to block access on Macs so they can't use their personal device. That could be a policy, or you can make it more restrictive, as in they can't download the corporate data to local storage or anything like that. So you can really get as granular as you want. But with each one of the supported devices, you should set up a compliance policy within Intune that decides whether or not it's in a healthy state, and then start enrolling devices into the mobile device management solution. So if you're still running an on-prem Active Directory environment, this is something where you can use hybrid Azure AD join to start managing those devices with Intune, in the sense of certain policies and applications, things like that, but also still have legacy GPOs being applied to those devices as well too. Again, I have a whole video on this as well, using Windows Autopilot. Lastly, there we have the create an app protection policy for Windows, iOS, and Android. The app protection policies are what gets you the restrictions on cut, copy, paste, on managing on save as permissions to unmanaged applications and things of that nature. So that's a really good one to set up in the very forefront of your implementation of M365 Business. Business environment is the next one that we have as far as the category under identify here. The organization's missions, objectives, stakeholders, and activities are understood and prioritized. This information is used to inform cybersecurity roles, responsibilities, and risk management decisions. So with this one, there's not exactly a Microsoft solution that directly applies to this because it's based on discovery and information gathering from the customer themselves. But the one question I would ask is if you know the customer's business structure and their mission statement. So if you understand their business structure, you can better identify where they have risk in the IT space where they may not see that, they're just seeing the business side of things. And then if you know their mission statement, you know where the business wants to go, you can enable them to be more productive, but in a secure manner. And that makes you look better as a managed services provider, in my opinion, because this allows you to cater the solutions to them and understand when you need to have more restrictive policies or less restrictive policies. Next category we have here is governance. The policies, procedures, and processes to manage and monitor the organization's regulatory, legal, risk, environmental, and operational requirements are understood and inform the management of cybersecurity risk. So this is really all about communication. Have you communicated your cybersecurity policies to the customer? Are cybersecurity rules defined internally at the customer level? Ideally, you'd like to have a champion at the customer site that is, one, somebody who can review cybersecurity alerts with end users. They have clear practices as far as end user training that they conduct without you being involved. And they have a clear definition of what they are supposed to be doing in the event of a breach or a cybersecurity incident at the company. The bigger question, though, comes in the sense of businesses that fall under compliance regulations. Do you have the controls in place if they were to get audited? This is huge. This is something that everybody is concerned about, and there are many fines involved if you have these security loopholes in place, which again is another big necessity of implementing a solution like M365 Business. What policies and procedures do you have implemented to govern and manage risk? Is this defined for every customer? So you need to have this as a standard policy that you review with the customer as you onboard them. And if you ever change that, you should review it again, because it will, one, give you a good opportunity to show how the security landscape has shifted, and maybe you get an opportunity to upsell them on certain services or solutions because of the new security threats that are out in the market. And then, is this defined for every customer? This is something that you should document. If they were to get breached, you need to show that you had all these procedures documented and use due diligence of getting these things in place from a technical standpoint. So for M365 solution, we're going to specifically look at the Service Trust Portal compliance score. This is brand new. It's in public preview right now. But the Service Trust Portal contains Compliance Manager, which is, again, much like Secure Score, if you're familiar with that. It gives you a credit score-like assessment of what you have turned on in the tenant itself. So it assesses what policies and profiles and things like that you've set up, and gives you a risk score based off of, or a compliance score, I should say, based off of that. And along with their own implementations, which are known as the Microsoft controls, you are given recommendations of things that you can do from a security and compliance standpoint in the tenant to improve your security and compliance posture. So these can be applied to certain compliance regulations. They have predefined templates for HIPAA, NIST, FINRA, things like that you could follow. And I recommend checking this out, especially with the new compliance score and compliance portal, because you can review these assessments directly from the portal. And to show you that real quick, I'm just going to pop in here. This is the compliance score. It's in preview. It's in the used to be Security and Compliance Center. They're shifting those into two separate portals. But this shows you your score, and then this shows you things that you can do to impact that score. And if we click on View All Improvement Actions, you can see here some of the things that they recommend, and you can click on them if they are applicable. And this is what's really cool to me, because they give you recommendations. They can redirect you into the correct portal for how you turn these things on. They can allow you to add notes and edit your status appropriately. So if you want to PM this is a great way to come in and do it. Secondly, the assessments are listed. You can add the assessments in the Compliance Manager. You see I've added HIPAA here, but you have, in every tenant, you have a data protection baseline that you can follow. And again, you can look at the task available to you here and PM this across your entire team to try to go in and enforce these policies or recommendations here if they're applicable. Second to that, we have the data loss prevention policies, which again, you can go ahead and implement. And this gives you the ability to take action when certain sensitive information is detected, like PII, for instance, in a Word document or in an email message or anything like that, to give a policy tip to the end user or to block that message completely from going to another department, outside your organization, things like that. With retention tags, we can do the same thing. So you can apply unique custom tags to certain documentation that contains certain sensitive data. And the retention tag has settings that define the retention of that document itself, when it should be audited. So these are a lot of the solutions there from retention. The encryption settings is very similar, common theme across all of these. If it detects certain PII, it can automatically encrypt an email without the user having to press the button on demand in their Outlook client, things of that nature. And then data classification labels allow you to apply a label like highly confidential or personal to particular documents, and these can be auto applied based again on sensitive data like customer credit card information or social security numbers or something like that, and you can apply controls to those particular categories of the label itself, such as encrypting an email to users outside the organization and things like that. So again, this is the Service Trust Portal. This is where you can come and you can see the assessments you have in place, and then you can add a new assessment. So you'll see the list here is pretty full of the things that you can do from the standpoint of looking at assessment. And again, they have Microsoft Assess controls and also the controls that they want you to go through as a checklist and actually implement in the tenant to improve your compliance score. So some of the action items: define your cybersecurity policy if you haven't done it already, or modify it based off the NIST security framework here. So this is something you should definitely review, again, on a periodic basis. You should communicate this with the customer, communicate their role in cybersecurity, define some champions at the organization, things of that nature. Define your policies around the governance of risk. So how do you guys manage it internally? Do you have risk assessments in place? Do you have vulnerability assessments in place? What does that look like today? And then log into the Service Trust Center and go to the assessment page where you can access that and check out some of the compliance regulations that your customers have to meet and review those items in the tenant with your team. So next one we have here as far as the category is risk assessment. The organization understands the cybersecurity risk to organizational operations, including mission, functions, image, and reputation, organizational assets, and individuals. So with this one, you really understand the vulnerabilities at the customer side itself. Are there asset vulnerabilities in the standpoint of cloud applications or any third-party applications that they're onboarding? What vulnerabilities exist from the standpoint of patch updates, from authentication, things of that nature that you really should be diving into with the customer. Are these vulnerabilities documented with a risk score? So once you identify them, you should have a standard risk score that you apply from maybe medium, high, low. It could be custom to your organization, but you should have something in place to identify what this looks like. So if an outside person looking in comes in, they understand what that looks like from your policy standpoint. Is business impact identified? If these assets were to get breached, are risk responses identified and prioritized? So two big ones here. We really need to understand the impact when somebody onboards a third-party application. If they get breached, what is the impact to the company, and what risk response are we looking at for these particular applications in general as well too. So from the M365 side of things, we're looking at Secure Score, Intune, and Azure AD. Secure Score is, again, much like Compliance Score, where we're giving a assessment of the overall posture of the tenant itself and giving recommendations on how to improve our security score. It's a holistic platform we can use to measure vulnerabilities across users, devices, cloud apps, and data. With Azure AD, we have basic role-based access control to help us to implement a model of least privilege so that we only give rights to people who need it. And we manage device risk and know if the device is in a compromised state with Intune. So it's saying, hey, if I've implemented a policy that detects for antivirus being present in a good state on the device, or if I'm saying that you need BitLock or encryption on the device can go out of compliance if those things aren't met. So Secure Score, as you see here, is much like the compliance score that we just looked at as well, where you have a total score and action items to improve that score and a history of that score over time categorized. And this actually mimics across different industries, and you can see how you compare against other industries of similar verticals as well. When you're thinking about onboarding a new customer, this is great to come in and look at from the standpoint of seeing where they have some vulnerabilities and also showing your value immediately, where you turn on security settings that improve their security posture right out of the gate. So this is a business case where we're saying, hey, we're using Secure Score. I can view the security actions to take in the tenant to get more secure state and see where vulnerabilities exist. I could see that global admin roles assigned to 5 users in the company that need that level of access. So that's one thing that you could immediately do, or getting suggestions about turning on MFA for certain users or all users, for instance, can greatly improve your security posture. I can also see devices that are in an uncompliant state and drill down to see why that device is potentially compromised. This can all be done from the admin portal, and you can immediately see when a device falls out of compliance and create some policies around that to prevent access to corporate data. So some action items: definitely document and define all asset vulnerabilities at the customer site. Keep this in a secure location. A lot of you guys use something like IT Glue or your PSA tool to store this documentation. Make sure it's stored for each customer. Make sure they understand the vulnerabilities as well, so you can better protect them and they're aware of where they could have some potential security breaches. Define the risk score for all the vulnerabilities. Threats, vulnerabilities, likelihoods, and business impact are all used to define this risk. So after you define it, document the risk responses and SLAs you want to meet for each. You should have some consistent messaging around this in the way you respond and how you respond, so that it's drilled into the customer's head of the actions that you're putting into place. So you want to log into the Security Center of Microsoft and review the Secure Score data. You may want to PM this as well too to improve the security posture of the tenant. So the next thing we have here is a risk management strategy for the next category. The organization's priorities, constraints, risk tolerances, and assumptions are established and used to support operational risk decisions. So this is, again, another one where this isn't associated to a particular Microsoft solution, but it is a conversation you want to have with key stakeholders at the customer level, so you can understand what their risk tolerance is based off of certain factors. When I think about that, I ask the certain questions to the customer about where business critical data lives, from intellectual property, who has access to that data and their roles within the company, and then what are the most business critical assets. So you can understand at an application level and a user level where you have the most vulnerabilities, but then also understand the risk tolerance around that user and the application itself, so you can define your policies in a more direct manner. And always consistent theme is to document this and understand what that risk management looks like at the customer level, flowing up into your technical level as well. So the last category we have to cover today is the supply chain risk management. The organization's priorities, constraints, risk tolerances, and assumptions that are established and used to support risk decisions associated with managing supply chain risks. The organization has established and implemented a process to identify, assess, and manage supply chain risk. So with this one, I primarily focus on any contractual obligations that the customer has with suppliers, distributors, things of that nature, their end customers, and also with outside contractors that come in to PM some work with them and then leave after a specified amount of time. So when you think about that and you think about data breach or data loss to external stakeholders, you want to ask the questions to the customer around how often they interact with users, what's the primary method of communication, how do they share documents, do they ever work on projects, is there language in the contracts that are speaking to the data that you'll be giving access to, and how do you know that your employees are using best practices when actually passing data outside of the organization? Is that business critical data? Do you know if that's happening? Do you know if it's sensitive data like credit card information? How can you track that? These are the answers to those questions. Where Microsoft 365 really shines in the sense of DLP and security. So we can look at Azure B2B or business to business. This allows you to securely collaborate with external users that may not even be on Azure Active Directory in a very secure manner and give them access to only certain applications that they need with conditional access, require heightened security for them like MFA every time they access a document or access your tenant in any sense. Data loss prevention policies that would prevent human error, again, if somebody is sending out personal identifiable information and they haven't encrypted the document is a good use case, or they don't realize they're sending it to an external domain up at the top of the screen, or they don't know that there's actually credit card information in this Word document that they're exposing the company to. So this is great because it can, again, force policy tips or block the send completely. Azure Information Protection can do the same, where it can detect certain PII or certain documentation with a particular classification like confidential can be prevented from sending to external domains, or can be encrypted upon sending, things of that nature to better help protect the company. So the business case here, user has a document containing social security numbers and attaches it to an email to send to a user of an external domain. With DLP policies in place, the user will get a policy tip to make sure they understand it's outside of the company and can encrypt the document automatically. This is a good example. This is a little bit different, where you have credit card information here, and it's giving you the policy tip and also telling you that the user that you're trying to send to is not authorized to receive this type of information. This is a policy override that you see available here, but that, again, is as granular as you want to get. You can completely block them, or you could offer the override feature so that they have to provide a reason for override, and that's at least audited and tracked. So again, we're showing that we are trying to be as compliant as possible, and we have these policies in place to do so. So some of the action items, you basically want to review the contracts that your customers have with third-party suppliers or their downstream customers, and make sure there's language in those contracts that specify what data they have access to. And after you understand that, you can understand what policies you need to have in place to meet those contractual obligations. Again, we want to enforce the least privilege model across the board, especially with external users. We want to configure DLP policies, AIP labels, conditional access policies, and external sharing settings to meet the company's requirements in a secure manner. So with this one, you're probably going to find a baseline level of policy set that you can implement across your customers that gives you enough security to meet most requirements. But obviously, you're going to come across some customers in some unique cases where you need to create a little bit more granular policies, or maybe lighten up a little bit on one because they perform business in a certain manner and they don't comply to certain regulations like HIPAA, for instance. So next steps, this is the end of this video guide. Next steps is going to be checking out part 2, where we look at the protect core function and go through the categories of that and map it to the M365 business solution as well too. Thanks guys. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them below.